Okay, so today we're going to tie one of my favorite summer and fall smallmouth, white bass, multi-species flies. It's called the Craw Clouser. I call it a Craw Clouser because basically that's short for a crawdad colored Clouser minnow. The Clouser deep minnow is probably one of the most generic patterns there is out there for flies. Bob Clouser designed the fly, and when he designed it, he got it right for just about everything. So I've taken a few liberties with this pattern, done a little tweaking, and come up with something that I really like for summer and fall fishing around here. So having said that, we'll go ahead and get started. We're going to start out on a Firehole 839 hook in a size 8, but really, honestly, any good streamer hook that you like, a Mustad 3366, which is what Clouser originally designed his pattern on. They work really well, or any really good streamer hook that you're confident in. I like something with a nice wide gap, but other than that, it really doesn't matter much. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to start our thread, which is a Vise 140, in this case in rusty brown. I've done these in tan and orange and a couple of other colors, and they've worked out just fine. So we're going to get that thread started. We're not going to go all the way back, we're just going to get it started, and then we're going to take a red barbell eye. This is actually not going to be an eye on this fly, it's going to be weight towards the tail. So a person could use an unpainted lead barbell eye or black barbell eye or something that's going to work just as well. But I do occasionally swim this pattern as a bait fish pattern too, so I kind of like having a little bit of an eye on there. We're going to set this a little bit back. We're going to start out with just some nice wraps to hold it on there, and then we're going to hold that fly parallel to the hook like this and start making cross wraps until it stays even on the hook. Don't have to be shy with the thread. Get that on there, and as soon as you've got that on there to where you're confident with the way it's looking, then you can take some horizontal wraps around to lock that into place. I've seen a lot of videos, and I've talked to a lot of people that also use a little super glue here to lock those eyes into place. It's not a bad idea. It's not going to hurt anything. I find that if your thread work is good and solid, you don't need it. There's going to be enough stuff tied onto that when we're done that everything's going to stay where it should be if you've got good thread control and good thread tension. The next thing we're going to do, and this is a little bit of a departure from Clouser's original pattern, we're going to add a couple of rubber legs to this fly to kind of imitate the antennas and the claws trailing out behind the crayfish when they move through the water. So we're just going to take a couple of the silicone legs off of a bass bug skirt. In this particular case, it's a kind of a chartreuse black and brown. I've also used bright orange legs. I've used a couple of other colors. Peanut butter and jelly, which is kind of a purple and brown, works really well. And we're just going to double these over like this, and we're going to take that loop of those legs, and we're just going to put them over the eye of the hook, stretch them over the eyes that we tied on. We're just going to go ahead and bind those down, and we're going to wrap that quite a ways down the hook. And the reason we're going quite a ways down the hook with that is that we don't want those legs to get fouled in the hook when we're casting. So we're going to go ahead and tie them down there where they're going to be free to move out here. We're going to cut these off a little bit to length, but we can do that when we finish the rest of the fly. It'll be a little easier to judge our length at that point as well. Next thing we're going to do for the back of this fly, for the overwing, we're going to use some red fox squirrel. And we're going to use the side with mostly orange on it. We're just going to take ourselves a little handful of nice long fibers. You're going to cut that off right down next to the tail, so we've got plenty of length to work with. And I like to measure that out so that the overall fly is about 1.5 to 2 times the length of the shank of the hook. So we're just going to take those and we're going to measure them out. Get some of the shorter fibers out, and we're going to lash that down real quick. And you're only going to lash that down just right behind the eyes. We want those hairs to have lots of room to move there. So we're just going to lash them down right behind the eyes. We're going to bring the thread up to the other side of the hook, and we're going to tie some nice tight wraps there. Once we're sure that we've got that tied down to where it's not going anywhere, we're going to take our scissors and get in here and trim out those hairs that we don't need. This doesn't have to be super neat because we are going to make a little neater thread head when we're all done with this. And you're just going to take, and with the thread you're going to knock down the rest of those fibers, and that's going to be, so far so good. We've got what's going to actually be the belly of the fly, because this hook's going to run, the barbells are going to cause this hook to turn upside down in the water, so it's going to run upside down. It's going to be in the water swimming like this, which makes this a really nice fly for rocky areas, for fishing close to the bottom like you typically do with crayfish, because it means that with that hook riding point up like that, we're going to see a lot less snags as well. So we're going to want to put a little flash into this fly, make him show up a little bit in the water. The water around here, clear is a subjective term. It's usually got some sort of a stain to it. So we want to give this fly a little bit of flash to make him show up a little better. So we're going to tie in a few strands of root beer crystal flash. And basically the way I do that is I just trim off about 3 or 4 strands, double those over so that we get a little more bulk. And we're going to tie those in. We want those to be just a tiny bit longer than our squirrel hair. We don't have to be exactly precise with that. If you're going to err to the side of a little too long, because we can always trim later. And we're just going to lock those in. Just enough wraps to lock those in, because we don't want this thread to build up too fast. Normally on a typical Clouser minnow, you'd have those eyes set a little further away from the eye of the hook, and you'd have a little more room to work with. But since we want the weight right back at the tail so that this crawfish will move realistically through the water, it doesn't give us quite as much room as we'd typically like for getting some of this stuff tied in without getting in trouble with crowding the eye of the hook. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take another clump of the fox squirrel tail, but we're going to take it from the back of the tail this time, so we've got all this nice orange and black modeling. And we're going to take that, we're going to find a nice good length of that hair. We're not going to need quite as much length this time because we're not going to go over the top of the eyes like we did before, so if you got a little shorter piece of your tail, this would be a good time to use that material up. Just a slightly thicker bunch than what we used on the back of the fly. And we're going to measure that so that it's about the same length as the other patch that we tied in. And then we're just going to go ahead and we're going to tie that right in on top. And take one quick wrap here, just to, or maybe 2 quick wraps just to lock that down. Switch hands. Enough wraps on there to make sure we've got it. And then we're going to trim this off, and when we trim this off, it's very important that you trim on a bias. Don't go in here and trim straight across, because you'll create a ledge that will be really hard to shape the head and get everything tied down afterwards. So if we just take that hair, and if we come in at an angle and just trim a nice little angle there, then when we get on this with the thread to finish this off, you see we get a nice smooth head out of that. And everything looks really good. Make sure we've still got the eye clear so that we can tie that guy on when we're done. Yep, there we go, we're clear. Like I said, usually not a problem, but we have a tendency to crowd things a little bit on this fly because those eyes are back a little further than they usually are. Then we're going to take this guy, we're going to throw a quick whip finish on him. Pull that tight. Whip finish on this one doesn't have to be perfect because we're going to go back here in just a second and do a little reinforcing to strengthen that. So we just want enough to hold it till we get that done. Okay, so to finish this up, we're just going to take a little bit of UV resin to strengthen this up a little bit. Just take a little bit of that resin, just paint a very light coat over the top of the eyes there, and a little more around the head. Get our UV light and shine it on there and set that up. Doesn't take very long, just takes about maybe 10-15 seconds to get that set up so that it's going to be nice and solid, and that's going to provide a little protection for the fly bumping across the bottom there. Yep, that's all nice and good. Looks like we got a couple of stray hairs here that we can go in now and get rid of. And we've got it. We've got our squirrel tail craw clouser tied up and ready to go. Actually had a chance to get this thing out here a few days ago and get it in the water, and had a really successful day with it. So we'll go ahead and close this video out with a little on the water footage of this fly in action. Thank you. Alright, we got him unhooked and ready to go back in the water, and we'll turn him loose and go get us another one.